What is going on, everybody, and welcome to another technical analysis. Now, every week I do put out technicals for my entries and exits for particular stocks that I am looking for. If that sounds like something you're interested in, consider subscribing, as I do also provide a weekly pulse on the market on upcoming events, upcoming earnings to get you prepared for the week ahead. I also do provide a daily pulse of the market on X at Hemi137 if you would like to follow me there. And before we get started, remember to drop a like because you like technicals. Now, with that being said, this week is going to be interesting. We're essentially pivoting on a point to where we are looking right at interest rate cuts. At least that's what the Fed are alluding to. There's have a very big probability that we will get one on the 18th of September. But we have to wait and see. Ultimately, we want to see how big a rate cut that's going to be, and that will kind of dictate how everything else may play out. So, with that being said, right now on the SPX, we are challenging all-time highs coming into this week. Now, this is Labor Day tomorrow, so the market will be closed. The futures should be open, but ultimately, what we're looking at is looking Tuesday through Thursday. Ultimately, the only big event we really have is we're looking at non-farms on Friday, then core next week, and then monetary policy. So we are vastly approaching some big events going into, again, the election. So under 70 days, we'll see what happens. So with that being said, again, if we can break this all-time highs, we definitely want to do that. If for some reason we can't break an all-time highs this week, that 5670, it's going to be an issue. I wouldn't be actually be surprised if we pull back to the 5,500 and just kind of wait there. I think what the market might be doing. So really will depend on what goes on with the market. Again, we want to know what's going on with the size of the rates. At this point, we're really focused on whatever size of the rate cuts are going to be. That will actually tell you if the Fed is concerned or not. If it's just 25, it's more of a political game, and they're not really concerned about anything at this point. But then the next following meetings will be important. You have to understand between September and November, there is no monetary policy unless they have to do emergency cuts. So again, September will be very pivotal. And this week will kind of dictate that if we can break out and start getting into price discovery mode again, then we just have to go to psychological numbers and potentially looking at 5,800 if the market can break out this week and start pushing up. Again, we are coming into a month that's normally a bad week, so we could maybe expect the 5,500 pullback. Again, we've had this massive rip up and no pullbacks. This obviously was the yen carry trade, put a lot of brand new fear, had us hit the 200 daily very quickly, almost overnight within 2 days. And then we recovered all that very quickly. Again, understand that there's a lot of liquidity being pumped into the market. So again, we will definitely have to see where we land during this week. As of right now, if we get in price discovery again, we just have to look at what's our psychological numbers in on the weekly. Again, very strong. This is when that cut was. This is what essentially a potential correction could look like, is that 32.47. Again, it's not saying it will happen. That's just on average. It can come in less, can come in more. We don't know. But we're going to have to see. But this is absolutely absurd. This massive rally like this, this big pivoting off of, this is ultimately when, we really started dictating rates around this point here. We started cutting not at 75-point basis moves anymore. I think we dropped down to 25 a couple last 2 or 3, and then we had a pause here, or else we would have broke that back down to new lows. So this has essentially been a pause as the market just rallies. I talked about this when this came into account, is that when the Fed pause, you normally rally, and that's exactly what we're seeing. We haven't seen much of a pullback at all, and the only reason this really pulled back was because of the yen carry trade. And now it looks like on the monthly we're ready to break out to all-time highs. So we'll definitely have to see how September plays out. But it's going to be extremely important. So let's take a look at Bitcoin. So Bitcoin has been kind of consolidating. Looks actually quite nicely. Nice big wedge turning out here for crypto. I'm watching this. I'm thinking this is going to continue to just chop within here till next year. Next year, I think there's going to be a lot of really pivotal information that's going to come out. Could bleed us and break it back down below, and I think if we do, it could be brief. For some reason, I do believe, I have a hunch that we might be revisiting this 3,600 one last time before we have our true bull market. Again, you got to have a greater catalyst to pull us down. And as of right now, the official numbers are good, but the underlying tone is really, really bad. And normally there is always kind of a bad tone in the market, but there's always something that could influence the market. But ultimately understand that at this point, it's never been more obvious about what could potentially be happening. So we definitely want to watch technicals here and see how this does play, but we could essentially be balancing between the 7,100 or and roughly around that 5,500. So we've been kind of bouncing around here. Monthlies is keeping it within this range. So again, we could get a nice break to either side. But again, I think for a bull run, we're going to get one last break down to get liquidity before we head up is what I'm looking for there. Let's take a good look at the bonds. Bonds is going to be extremely important, especially when we start kind of talking about rate cuts. And the size of rate cuts are really going to matter. If we start getting 75 or 100 point cuts, which that's like sheer panic mode for the Fed, this thing is going to start gapping up. So I've already taken a position in this, kind of looking for this to potentially play out. We might get a little bit more pullback down to this 92, kind of expecting that, but we're going to have to see moving forward what could potentially play here with TLT. But definitely watching this, you want it to break out above the 100. If it does, then you're looking at the 110 mark. But it's really, again, expecting this to kind of pull back roughly to the 92 and kind of play within this range until we start getting massive cuts from that point. So with that being said, let's jump over to Tesla. Tesla, I really like Tesla, much like the same. Again, I think this is going to be a huge play when it comes to FSD. You got to remember October 10th, I believe, is when they announced robotaxi stuff. And then also they got humanoids on the back end of that. My only concern with Tesla is Elon Musk and what's currently going on with the election in X as of right now. That may bring some concern to Tesla. So just be wary of that. I feel like this thing does want to at least come down to the 170 one more time here. But we're going to have to see. I definitely like it within this range. Anything below 200, I think, is a great buy. So I've been in and out of this a couple different times and caught a couple of these nice pops. So continue to watch this, really watching these zones, really watching that 170. 200 is a pretty solid support as of right now. Ultimately, if the market wants to run, we need to see if it breaks out the 230 and then see where it kind of goes from there. Again, I do really like this in the higher time frames, but we'll have to see, again, what Tesla is capable of doing. As of right now, we did get a strong candlestick, so that 230 is going to be important this week to see if we can break that or we get rejected and come back down. So we're definitely watching that one. Amazon, I've been really watching as well. I would bring up Palantir, but it really just needs to pull back, in my opinion. So we'll see what happens there. And then Amazon, kind of aiming for that 190 mark for potential, kind of like Tesla. We'll see if it hits that, gets rejected. Otherwise, kind of watching this 160 range. Again, see if it can make a higher. If it can't make a higher high here, makes a higher low. It's kind of really a turning point going into September. Again, you're looking into a normally weak month, so we'll see what happens, especially with all the concern around what's going on with the elections. So we'll see what happens with that. And then NVIDIA, again, had big earnings. I talked about this in my weekly analysis video. Again, beat expectations, but not by a huge amount. And they had a lot of very, very high expectations. So you have to be perfect when your expectations are that high. And again, they're still kind of struggling. So if this can't pick up the pace and reclaim this 125, it's going to be concern for them coming into this week. Otherwise, it needs to hold this 118. Could see it potentially dipping down the 105. Again, it's a big drop. But we definitely have to see how this is going to play, because if it starts dropping again, it holds a lot of weight in the market. So that's why I want to bring this one up this week. But we really want to be watching NVIDIA and seeing if it starts to sell off. So it needs to hold this 118 support as of right now. And then let's take a look at, I've already kind of looked through all these. Affirm, I've been in and out of this one, but it had good earnings, obviously, because nobody's got extra money right now. We talked about buy now, pay later. Highly concerning when this thing starts to flip. I don't know if they get accredited from the government or whatever. If people are just delinquent, they can get still some of that money back. But nonetheless, someone's overall losing. But it's just not Affirm. Affirm's doing pretty well right now. So we'll watch and see. But I just wanted to bring this one up. See if it does pull back anymore. As of right now, it's been in equity fire state. So kind of really watching it for top out at $50. Otherwise, it needs to hold this 37 mark, or 37 mark. I don't know why I said 337, but yeah. So watching Affirm as well, I think that could be potentially a good one. Typically, when you get runs like this, you're good for about 3 to 4 days, and then it starts to turn over. So just be mindful of that. SoFi, again, starting to get some momentum here. Want to see if it does pull back. It needs to hold roughly the 776 mark. But aiming for that roughly around that $9 mark, we could be potentially seeing if the market starts pushing up. I could see SoFi pushing right now. Financials are pushing, so I could see potentially SoFi going to 9 this week. If you want an entry, you might have missed it, but the 780 could potentially have been your entry for the 9. If it does pull back, you can drop quite a bit, so just be careful of that. You might drop all the way down to 673. So just be careful with this. It really needs to hold this level. If it breaks down, it's got a small support here, kind of like a speed bump, and then it could potentially fall all the way back down. Could potentially even remove this. It makes it look a lot clearer that way when you see that. So, and then let's take a look at BA, as we always do. Again, continuing to chop, but holding that 164 mark. Could be a potentially entry here. Again, I think you're toying a lot when you're messing with Boeing right now, but I, again, always use it for value play. But it's playing pretty well, again, between the 161 and roughly the 195. I'd probably say it comes in lower than that, about 195, 192. So kind of watching this and seeing how it does. Again, the market rolls over. I think this thing might tank pretty hard back down to the 120. So you definitely have to be careful with this one. Again, there hasn't been any great news, especially over the past week, with them essentially stranding astronauts in space. Was not good news for them. So again, I don't know why this stock is sitting at 173, but somehow it still is. So you definitely have to be careful with that one. Let's take a look at JPM. Probably looking right at it and not really looking right at it. There it is. So JPM this week, again, it's in price discovery mode. You really want it to hold this 216 is what you're really watching. It looks like we did get a little bit of a retest and got bought back up. So this might be in price discovery mode. Again, it only moves about 5 points. You're kind of really looking at like 230 this week, up or down. So about 5 points down. It might come back down to roughly that 219 mark. So kind of really watching that. Again, there's no real big news this week other than non-farms, unless something new that's unscheduled comes out. Again, I've been talking about and emphasizing that you may see a lot of that happening, especially as of right now. So just do keep that in mind. But if the banks are going to start running, that could help the markets, and then just potentially waiting for tech to turn around. Tech can turn around. The market might get one last boost here before we start cutting rates. Again, it's not really so much the cutting rates are that big of a deal. It depends on how big of a cut it is. And it depends on what the sentiment is tied with that cut. There has to be a reason why, and that reason why is typically scares the market. So that's what you have to be mindful of. If it's 75 or 100 point basis move, that's concern. They're worried about something, and there will be some sentiment tied to that. And that's when you have to be careful, because that's when the market really starts pulling back. And then I do want to bring up this one. If you've made it this far, I think commodities are going to be, when you understand the cutting cycle, commodities normally start to run. And so right now, there's a great entry for oil as of right now. And I think this would be a fantastic play, really looking for your entry around here, around the 56, and kind of aiming for that 72 mark. I think, again, over the next couple months, when they start cutting, you have to realize that when that happens, typically commodities will start running, and that's what's concerning, is that you might start getting inflation back if they start getting a super cycle. And a lot of people have been talking about a super cycle that could be lining up with commodities because of what's going on with again, with the worries and concerns about inflation and them having to slowly ease this thing. So we could potentially see a massive run. um, I'm at least aiming for roughly around the 75 mark here. But if inflation really starts running away, you can see another $100 for OPX, potentially even higher, get a new all-time highs. We're gonna have to see how this plays out. But again, I think over the next couple of months, I think this thing might play out. Again, these are again our monthly candles. So you could get a massive spike up as these things start to run up. So I wanted to bring that one up. If you made it this far, I don't typically talk about oil. I used to trade it all the time when I first got into investment and trading, but ultimately understand that right now I don't typically. But this particular cycle, I think if you're talking about a potential super cycle, this could run massively, and if that happens, try to take advantage of it. So I do want to play some oil. I like playing oil every now and again, especially when you start getting these cycles. It's good to have as a regular. It's very predictable for the most part. And when you see it coming, just ultimately understand that I really like Oxy for the next couple months as a longer swing, and then kind of looking once everything else plays out, once bonds potentially play out, and looking at the super cycle with oil, and then hopefully tech sells off enough to position yourself into tech at that point is kind of what I'm looking at. So we'll see what happens here. But right now, I do really like the consolidation around the 56 level. And again, still aiming for roughly around that 73, 72 mark. Kind of see where it goes from there. You can always just, put a stop right underneath there if it gets that high, and then see if it wants to super cycle up and potentially aim for 100, potentially all-time high. Who knows? But kind of really watching that, kind of one of the things I wanted to bring up if you did make it this far. So if you didn't make it this far, go ahead and drop a like. Not very long. Again, there's not a lot really going on over the next couple of weeks. There will be a lot going on as we prepare for the rate cuts, and then that will really dictate everything. So that's what we're ultimately waiting for. And then we'll get our answer here shortly. So with all that being said, again, have a great day, and I'll see you guys on the field.